The room was filled with luxury, polished marble floors, crystal glasses, and a billionaire CEO ready to make his deal, but in seconds, everything unraveled without a translator. His voice meant nothing, and panic took over. Whispers spread, eyes turned, and the silence grew heavier by the second. Then, someone nobody respected, nobody even noticed, stepped forward when she spoke. The entire room froze. What could a maid possibly say that left a billionaire speechless? He was the kind of man who walked into any room expecting it to bend around him. A billionaire CEO, polished suit, sharp words, and a reputation for never losing control to his world. He was untouchable. Meetings unfolded like theater performances where he always played the lead, and everyone else played supporting roles. That night was no different. The chandeliers sparkled above, the finest wines flowed, and the deal on the table promised to expand his empire even further. But beneath the shine and confidence, there was one flaw he didn't prepare for. He didn't speak the language normally. His translator, fluent, professional, always at his side, handled it. But tonight, fate had left him alone. The room filled with foreign voices he couldn't decipher, and for the first time in years, his power slipped through his fingers. He tried to mask it with a smile, but the unease was clear. Eyes shifted toward him, waiting for his words, his command, his brilliance. And as the seconds dragged on, silence became heavier than stone. What he didn't notice was someone quietly standing in the background, watching the scene unfold, a woman no one expected to matter, a maid, ignored by many, holding the one thing he desperately needed. The silence grew unbearable. The billionaire shifted in his chair, the confident smirk he wore at the start of the evening slowly melting into a forced grin. Without his translator, he was adrift, stranded in a sea of words he couldn't understand. Around him conversations carried on, fluid, fast. He cleared his throat, attempting to regain control. A few polite chuckles, some sympathetic nods, but also whispers that carried weight. A man of such power, unable to connect, unable to command. The cracks in his image spread like fractures in glass. Some guests exchanged glances, others shook their heads. Respect slipped through the room like sand between fingers. That's when the staff entered to refill glasses and tidy tables. Among them was a black maid, dressed in the uniform of her position, moving quietly and efficiently. To most, she was invisible, a shadow that served but was never acknowledged. But in the corner of her eye, she saw his panic. She saw the billionaire's face tighten, the sweat forming at his temples, the arrogance crumbling under pressure. She understood exactly what was happening. Still, she hesitated. To speak out would mean breaking boundaries, drawing attention, risking ridicule. She had seen this before, how the wealthy and powerful dismissed people like her. Her voice had been overlooked, ignored, silenced. Why should this moment be any different? At the table, the CEO's frustration turned to desperation. He gestured wildly, trying to convey meaning with his hands, but it only fueled the quiet laughter around him. To the guests, it was entertainment, a powerful man brought low by something as simple as words. Yet beneath the mockery was something sharper, contempt. They weren't just laughing at his silence, they were questioning his worth. The maid's grip tightened on the tray she carried. She remembered the sting of invisibility, of being reduced to a stereotype, of being treated as though her mind and voice were meaningless. And now, before her, the same arrogance that had dismissed her kind was unraveling. The question burned inside her: should she stay silent, as expected, or step forward and change everything? The room leaned in, waiting for the CEO's next move. His face flushed red, his confidence completely stripped away. For the first time, he was vulnerable. The whispers grew louder, the silence heavier, the laughter sharper. He was trapped in his own cage of pride and ignorance. And then, she took a single step forward, just one. Her presence drew no notice at first, drowned out by the weight of the scene. But within seconds, that step would shift the entire balance of the room. No one knew it yet, but the moment was coming when the quietest person, the one they all ignored, would hold more power than the man who had everything. All it took was a single word. Her voice cut through the noise, steady and fluent, spoken in the very language the CEO could not grasp. The room froze. Forks hovered mid-air, glasses stopped halfway to lips. Every head turned, not toward the billionaire, but toward the maid they had barely noticed before. She spoke with precision, with confidence, her words flowing effortlessly. The foreign guests leaned in, listening, nodding in approval. For them, it wasn't just translation, it was connection, respect, and understanding, all delivered by the one person they had been taught to overlook. But the reaction from the CEO was different. His face stiffened, eyes wide, caught between disbelief and humiliation. How could she, a maid, a woman society reduced to invisibility, succeed where he had failed? The whispers returned, sharper this time, laughter mixed with awe. The billionaire who once commanded the room now sat powerless, overshadowed by someone he had likely never even acknowledged. For the maid, every second felt like standing on a knife's edge. She knew what it meant to speak out. She knew the risk of crossing the invisible lines drawn by wealth, by race, by class. But as the room leaned on her words, she realized something powerful. She wasn't invisible anymore. For once, her voice carried weight, more weight than the billionaire's wealth, more weight than his pride. The tension in the air was electric. The CEO tried to regain control, forcing a strained laugh, but it was too late. The image of invincibility he had built for years shattered in front of everyone, and all because the person he considered least significant revealed a truth too sharp to ignore. Dignity and intelligence aren't measured by money, skin color, or status. In that moment, the hierarchy of the room shifted. The powerful sat humbled, the ignored stood recognized, and the world inside that banquet hall would never look the same again. The question now wasn't whether the maid had spoken, but what her courage would mean when the night was over. When the banquet ended, the billionaire slipped away quietly, his pride shattered in a way money could not repair. He left behind a room still buzzing, not about his wealth, not about his empire, but about the maid who dared to speak for many. It was a moment they would never forget, a reminder that respect cannot be bought, and that true power sometimes comes from the most unexpected voices. For the maid, it was more than just translating words. It was reclaiming dignity in a world that so often tried to deny it. In that moment, she stood taller than the man who once believed she was beneath him. Yet, her story is not an isolated one. Across the world, countless voices, black voices, working-class voices, voices society deems unimportant, are silenced or ignored until they are forced to prove their worth. And even then, the recognition often comes laced with disbelief. This night was a mirror, reflecting the deep inequalities we live with every day. How many times have brilliant minds been dismissed because of the color of their skin? How many talents overlooked simply because they didn't come wrapped in wealth or privilege? The truth is, racism doesn't always appear in violent confrontation. Sometimes, it hides in silence, in assumptions, in the casual arrogance of those who believe status equals superiority. But as this story shows, the most overlooked person in the room can dismantle that illusion with nothing more than their voice. So, what will it take for us to start listening before we're forced to? How many more stories like this will it take for the world to finally understand that dignity is not given, it is inherent? Maybe the real question is, when will we stop being shocked, and start treating every voice as equal from the very beginning?